My name is Alex Chehorsky.
I'm Regina Ravazova.
We belong to two different generations.
We're former refugees.
I've served and worked in two armies, Russian and American.
And I was among civilians trapped in a war at the age of 7.
I am a former Putin's classmate.
I'm a mother of 3.
We are now watching the tragedy of Ukraine unfold in front of our eyes.
Watching from across the ocean, it is a distant war, yet very personal. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Regina.
So we have two really interesting topics today. Why don't we start from the meeting? Why don't we start from the meeting, and then we have a series of interesting strategic, let's say, probably most likely strategic explosions on Russian soil that I've been following for a while, and I compiled some sort of chronology, which is not exact, and of course it might be the exact list might be like much more extended, but in Russia there's a problem with getting the information, with confirming the information. But so far, I do have a few things that I wanted to touch upon. But first, we wanted to talk about, Alex, you can take it from there.
Okay.
Ramstein, right?
Yes.
Is that a base in Germany, American base in Germany?
Not only it's a base in Germany, I've actually stayed there.
Oh, really?
Yes, in 2011, while I was in Afghanistan with the U.S. military, I traveled to Ramstein from Kabul, and I stayed there for several days doing things that I needed to do, and never, of course, I thought. By the way, beautiful place.
I wanted to ask you, can you describe it to me? Like, what is it?
I tell you, this is really funny. Once I was there myself, and the second time, it was a year later. Natasha and I decided to spend my 2 weeks of, quote unquote vacation, as much as you can take vacation during the war. We decided to go to Germany and France. Natasha flew to Frankfurt, and we were traveling to Paris. But interestingly enough, Ramstein is a base that exists on the photos and on the Google, the space map. But it does not exist on normal maps. The Germans are kind of avoiding using it. And what happened is that the road from Frankfurt to Paris, before they created the old road, was going through Ramstein. Our computer took us just to the entrance to the Ramstein, where I was before as a U.S. military personnel. But Natasha did not have, I still had that card, but Natasha did not have the credentials, so they turned us around. So this is a non-existent place. You know what I'm saying? If you will go to the German maps, you will not find Ramstein. If you will go to the Google map, it's there. It's a huge base, huge, enormous. I would never forget, like I get off the plane from Kuwait, and I looked to the right, and there was that line of huge transportation place, C-17s. I don't know if you have seen them or not. You can play. I played volleyball inside that plane. It's a huge transportation American plane, and the line of these planes were going, I don't know, over horizon. I don't know how many, 50, 60. I have no idea. So it's a big base, very well maintained, green, nice, very clean air, unbelievable. And when I was there, I never thought that this word someday, Ramstein, because in today's world you say Ramstein and people immediately think about the Ramstein German
The band?
the band, but still it is a much more important place than that. And I never thought that one day it will actually be put not only on the military maps and military history, but in a world history. This is the first time since the creation of communist Russia, since 1917. It is the first time that finally the civilized world finally saw through the mist, through all the masquerade, through everything, they finally saw the beast at the core of this system. They finally understood the danger, the unavoidable danger, that you cannot deal with that you cannot pacify it, that you cannot, they tried everything. Since 1917, they tried everything to live with that system on the same planet. And finally, they understood that it is impossible. And what
Tell us,
they've
first of all, what, so 40 leaders, defense ministry, whoever,
yeah
the
yeah
officials were, 40 different countries. We're not talking about NATO. There's some countries from Africa. There's
exactly,
a lot of different
we're talking about
leaders.
civilized world.
Right,
Yes.
right, right. So they came together, and what happened?
Of course, we were not told actually what happened in detail. We have a layer of information that is an open information. And of course, I think it's only scratches the surface. But the most important thing is that it was not a discussion what to think about it, finally. It was discussion, what are we going to do? General Austin, who I have a very high regard of him, I actually think that the combination of General Austin and President Biden, and I have to open a little bit here of my own political affiliation. I'm a conservative Republican. I am a never Trumper conservative Republican, but nevertheless, the whole democratic politics for me is not really close to my heart. But I have to say that the fact that finally we have a president and the Secretary of Defense, both of whom are not American elite, both of whom are not the product of Harvards and Yales, both of who grow up in a blue-collar neighborhoods, Biden in Philadelphia and Austin in Atlanta. They both understand, and I will have to say the word in Russian first and then try to translate it in English. In Russian, there is a word gopnik. That is, in American, I think the best way to translate in English, it's a riffraff. I think. I was trying to translate that word long time ago. But that's what I think it is. And these guys, the guys like Obama, the guys like Bush, the guy like Clinton, they were never really exposed to that level of the street rats. You know what I'm saying? How these people behave. They kind of like thought of the Russian, secretaries and Russian presidents as equals.
Right.
As people,
Something more
the
civilized.
world political elite. Yes,
Sure.
yeah, well, he came from a different corner of life, but still. And that was always a big mistake. That was going on from 1917. And most of these people were riffraffs, more
Most
or
of
less.
these people were shpana.
Yes, Spana, Gopnik, it's the same thing. It's a criminal thinking, with a little bit of a color on the surface, but not even education will change that. And finally, we have two guys who've been raised in a blue-collar neighborhoods, who understand that, who understand what these people are capable of, and who understand that whatever they say, whatever they promise, means absolutely nothing. And Secretary Austin said, among other things, he said, we will move heaven and earth to make sure that these people will never have the possibility to do the same again, that system.
And you know what happened then? Then the White House entirely backed his words. They're like, yeah, he's speaking what we are thinking.
Exactly. There's a generation between you and me, but I'm pretty sure that it's not only I've never heard anything like this. You never heard anything like this too, right? So it's not that I was paying more attention probably in 70s and 80s, but you are a contemporary journalist. You're paying a lot of attention to what's going on now. I've never heard anything like that coming from anybody. And then we had the support from England, and then we have a support from France, so on and so on and so on, and even from Germany. As you remember, we discussed that Germany is still reluctant, and that reluctancy is still there. And I still think that our German friends should finally, straighten out their political class and, do what normal Germans, the everyday Germans, are doing. I know a lot of stories how the simple German folk are actually, helping Ukrainians in, just giving them their own, houses and apartments and everything for free. And at the same time, the German elite is still sitting there trying to count the money that they can make on the Russian gas and all that stuff. Just shameful, shameful. But I hope that will change in a very near future, because even if it will not change because they will see the moral side of it, the Germany will not go against the whole civilized world. They are too business savvy and too political savvy to do that. So that's, in my opinion, what's the most important thing is that how that Ramstein meeting, what can we see, what can we look at the horizon and see where it goes. Yes, of course, it's obvious that Ukraine will get more and more help and Ukraine will get more and more equipment. That is understood. What is not understood yet, in my opinion, is that we are now looking at the beginning of the change of a Western and European culture. We are now looking, the people will be prepared to understand why it happened, why so many people all over the world are subject to propaganda to that extent, both on a in the Russian side and in other countries. We will probably never come back to the situation that we discussed a couple of podcasts ago. If you remember, we were talking about the leaders, that are, the weak leaders, and that whole, 3 decades of weak leadership. That will also probably be addressed, because you see, business is still running the world. And it should be that way, because business is a creation of things, right? It's creation of values. It's what distinguishes us from the animals. And the business finally understands how much it costs business, how much it costs the countries to allow what they allowed the past 30 years to happen with Russia. All these businesses that were spending enormous amount of money to thinking that they will, reap the benefit of getting new markets in Russia and everything else, they were all forced to retreat, forget everything, just throw everything away. And now probably the thinking horizon of business will be extended. I cannot overemphasize that. The horizon of thinking of business, instead of 10 years, 20 years, will be extended. And the moral understanding of how business should look at the moral side of its deals, how business should evaluate the possibilities of that it will have to run away for the moral reasons, because of butchers, because of the things that the Russian army was doing in Ukraine, because no business can associate itself with anything like that. That, plus the epidemics that also did that. The epidemics also expanded the thinking horizon of business, will extend the thinking horizons of education, the thinking horizons of politics, the thinking horizons of the world in general. That's what I am trying to interpret of the shadows that I see on the horizon.
Yeah, interesting. Let me now switch to the events that I've been following for a little bit. The explosions, fires. There was a dam that was destroyed and fell into the river that is supposed to carry tons and tons and tons of water to agricultural sector of Russia. The UK defense minister said something along the lines of it's absolutely acceptable for Ukrainians to use Western weapons on Russian soil for counteroffensive attacks. All right, that's what they're called on Russian soil, which was, I thought, am I dreaming? A little chronology here. April 1st confirmed that it was a first major counteroffensive attack on Russian soil. Morning of April 1st, I think it was 5 something a.m., Russian officials from Belgorod, Belgorod is a city about less than 20 miles away from Ukrainian border, reported that 2 helicopters crossed into Russia, struck an oil depot and other buildings, destroying various infrastructure, and then they went back. No one was hit. They flew such a low altitudes, which I heard, I'm not a military expert, but I heard that they're trained in these low altitude flights. So they couldn't, the Russian defense, the Russian radars couldn't distinguish them in time. So they blow them up and they come back. I want to mention here, though, that right next to the oil depot that they exploded, basically, was a big military base. They didn't touch it. They could, they didn't. So I remember many accounts of Ukrainian journalists. They were like, well, Russians, you've been warned. The war will come to your home. No Ukrainian officials confirmed or denied that it's their doings, right? Fast forward April 14th, Russian missile cruiser Moskva. I put it in my list because that was kind of important thing that was struck by Ukrainian Neptune missiles. Lots of people died. We still don't know the number. Russians reported first that the fire happened due to the ammunition on board exploded. Everyone was evacuated. We know it. These are all lies. We know it. Majority of people probably were left to die, or died immediately after explosion. April 21st, early morning again. Massive fire erupts on Russian so-called top secret airspace defense research institute in Tver. Tver is a city about, I think, 100 miles, northwest from Moscow.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So, Sash, with this one, I actually stopped. I wanted to do a little bit more digging. What did it do? Because Wikipedia, that has lots of information on everything, has just one line. In kind of broader strokes, it's a development of a state-of-the-art Russian weapon system. And to name a few, it developed stealth aircraft system for Tu-160 and Su-27. It had a hand in developing Iskander missile systems, and also, I think, S-400 missile systems. All in all, approximate numbers here, by the Ukrainian journalists, what this research institute was doing was participate in development of 8 types of anti-aircraft missile system, 10 types of interceptors, 32 types of automation systems. At present stage, they were really focused on 2 main things, as I understand. It's artificial intelligence, and they were building these miniature connectors that are used in, I believe, in military robotics. They have a test site that is used to develop invisibility systems for frontline and long-range aviation complex. Russia reported 7 people dead. It's more than 25 people dead. That's what we know for now. Same day, this wasn't picked up by news outlets that much. The same day, few hours later, a fire on one of Russia's largest chemical plants, Dmitrievsky plant. Maybe you know about it. It's in, I think it's in Ivanovskaya Oblast. It's about 250 miles away from, I think, northeast from Moscow. Anyways, the website was describing this plant as the largest producer of butyl acetate.
Every time we're talking about Russian or Soviet enterprises, you have to understand that very rarely they are really named about things that they do. For instance, all Russian tank producing centers were always called tractor producing, the tractor factories, or the rail car factories. So you see that Kharkov tractor factory, and it probably, and it does a little bit of tractors, but this is the biggest tank building facility. So this is the usual. So if that factory was called, something like
butyl acetate,
and I'm pretty sure they've done a lot of it, but most probably the biggest part is some other chemical or chemicals that even can be chemical weapons. I have no idea. What I know is that most of these, not all of them, but most of these factories, apart from what they produce, so to speak, openly, apart from that, the bigger production is military or military usage or some kind of that. And the fact that it was burned, I think, just means that that was exactly what it was. My experience, my 35 years in Russia, having two parents who were, involved all their lives in the nuclear industry, my experience said that every time you have that front sign on some kind of a factory, there is another one behind it which is not visible.
Very good point. Thank you so much, Sash. I have no idea. So great point. So reported as a butyl acetate producer. Later, not confirmed for a few days, later confirmed. The reason reported by Russian officials is aging wire.
Yeah, nothing but, of course, the Russian officials, they're torn between two things. On one hand, they want to convince the Russian population that, the country is under attack. On the other hand, they're ashamed to admit that there could be a Ukrainian attack, because for them it's an evidence that they cannot contain and they cannot protect the Russia proper, because as of today the Russian population feels protected because Ukraine was told to be a weak country with weak military. But when it starts to blow up in your backyard, people start to ask themselves questions. And the Russian government is now trying to understand which is most important: to keep population thinking that it is protected and the war will not touch them, or to raise the level of hate toward Ukraine as a country that is prepared, to kill your children by blowing up these factories. And we will see which side will win.
April 22nd. The dam. Again, this news was not picked up by Western media. Not that much. I didn't see it anywhere besides a very, very few tiny little outlets. The dam of the Fedorovsky hydroelectric complex. It's on Kubань River. It's southern Russia, to my understanding. It had the capacity of 1.4 thousand cubic meters, based on my research, of water per second, and supplied 130,000 hectares of agricultural land in Krasnodar territory. What does Krasnodar territory grow? Do you know that?
I know that they have tea there, but I know
Okay.
that it's not their major thing. What is it?
To my understanding, it's rice. To my
Rice,
understanding,
I
it's
see.
tons of rice
Uh-huh.
that feeds Russia. So that happened. There's some road damage, which will be damaged for a very long time by the river because, as you can imagine, it's now spilling everywhere.
Uh-huh.
On the 25th, just a few days ago, Kiev Independent journalist reports large fire in Bryansk. Have you heard about it? Bryansk,
Yes,
which
of
is
course.
sitting on
Yes.
Druzhba pipeline.
Yes, oil, Russian European major oil
Major,
pipeline.
exactly. It's the longest pipeline in the world and one of the biggest ones. It took the oil and it brought it to points in Ukraine, Belarus, Germany, Hungary, Slovakia, Czechia, Austria, Poland. Footage shown fires basically igniting very fast. A lot of people speculated it was a missile attack, and the fires, from what we know, were burning for more than 12 hours. They were massive. And finally, my last one is on the 26th, 2 days ago. Russians reported explosions at 3 storage depots in Belgorod, again Belgorod, Voronezh, and Kursk. All of them are not far away, kind of, from Ukrainian eastern border. I mean, within,
But deeper
deeper,
than Belgorod.
much deeper, yeah.
Much deeper, yes.
These are 3 areas that supply and reinforce Russian troops. Now, I want to finish here, Sash, and I want to tell you that last night I went to dinner with a few friends
Uh-huh.
and we started arguing about this very topic. Because some of the arguments that right now, at least surfacing on Western or English speaking media, is that Are these generals that are blowing the supplies that they sold, that they, that they basically sold out and bought the villas, and now they're trying to blow it up because they don't have supplies that are needed now for war? Or are these Ukrainians? At least in some of them.
I tell you what, I think that we will know one day, definitely. There are things that we will never know, but there are things that we will know. And this we will know because there are a lot of interesting questions. For instance, when the first attack on Belgorod was done, as you said, remember you said that there was a military base and they didn't touch it. That's true. But also, right next to these oil repositories, there was a major railroad crossing. Not crossing, but the railroad hub that was full of oil trains. Like trains with hundreds of cars all carrying oil. They never touched that either. That allows me to suggest that this can be a Russian, what is it called, foreign flag operation.
Tell
You
me
know
more
what it
about
is,
it.
right?
No, no, I have no
A
idea.
foreign flag operation is like the famous operation that Germans did before, at the beginning of the World War One. They went into the German radio station in Poland, the Germans, and blew it up. Then they said that it was done by Poles in Poland, and that was a pretense for the war. Another foreign flag operation is the beginning of a Russian war with Finland. The Russia actually shot the artillery shell into its own territory, into the village of Manila. And then they said, oh, that was Finnish attack, and that was a precursor of a Russian-Finnish war. So that's what it's called, foreign flag or enemy flag attack. So the fact that the quote-unquote Ukrainians, they could have been, I have no idea, but if I were as a Ukrainian pilot and I will be looking at the railroad, because you understand that the Belgorod is the supply hub for the Russian army in Ukraine, and bombing the railroad hub with a lot of oil tanks in it and everything else would do an enormous damage to the supply line. They didn't do that. That allows me to think that that could be a foreign flag operation from Russians. And the reason for that could be is that Russia pushes their generals at the time for the big push on the front in Ukraine without giving them enough of resources. And the Russian generals could have decided that we need to postpone that at least. And a reason for that would be that attack of these terrible Ukrainians, they blew up our oil reserves. In a certain way, because of the Kremlin push, that Kremlin wants to finish that war and to win it, but it does not want to do the whole country mobilization because for political reasons. So it pushes the Russian generals to do that, and they don't want to because they all understand that if they lose, they will be blamed for that. So at that moment, the Russian interest, the interest of Russian generals, and the interest of Ukraine coincide. Both sides don't want a major push on a front for completely different reasons. So I think that this logic could be applied to almost any of these situations, except for that research institute. That, of course, in no way the only thing that it could have been done not by Ukrainian side or somebody who is connected to that side or somebody who is trying to help that side is that something happened in that research facility that the managers of that research facility want to hide. Okay, they stole an enormous amount of money, or they pretended that they did something and they didn't. And another small reason that allows me to think that is that remember that the systems that were protecting them, the cruiser Moscow, its anti-air and anti-rocket was the S-300, S-400, which was the child of that institution.
Yep.
So we have a major Russian ship, which was actually a the headquarters of the front, it was not able to protect itself with the product of that institute, and 10 days ago it was burning, and then 10 days later it was burning. So that allows me to think that there is a connection, that the S-400 was not to the specifications, that something was done wrongly, and these guys in the institute wanted to cover it up and they burned it.
We're speaking out loud all our ideas and thoughts, which is in the situation of a war, it's very, very difficult to confirm. We will learn later probably about some
All
of
we're
it.
trying to do, both of us, in each one in his own way, we're trying to alert our listeners, the English-speaking public, of the logic of a criminal thinking on the Russian side. Okay? A normal person should not think that way. It is that criminal thinking of a Soviet and Russian system that were installed in you and me by the fact that we lived there. You know, we look at something like that, and instead of just saying, oh, that's a terrible tragedy, people died, we immediately think that it could have been this and that. There could have been the hidden reason for these things. And we're not talking about conspiracy theories. We're talking about things that Russian history is peppered by all, since 1917, that its creation. So that's what basically we're trying to accomplish here, is to erase the consciousness of the Western public to every time you deal with something that happens in Soviet Russia or in the Russian Republic now or in that corner of the world, you always have to think about the connection. The connection has to be based on a factual. I'm not saying that they stole money, right? I'm not doing that connection. I'm saying that I saw the cruiser going down into the Black Sea. It was protected by Israeli rockets, and these were the burning institution that actually gave birth to these rockets.
Sure thing.
So
Sure.
so we're basing it on facts, but not on the pure suggestions, and it still could be wrong. But
Yeah.
it also people also has to evaluate that too.
Yeah. Think differently. Think,
Right.
Because the thinking here is very different. One thing though, Sash,
Uh-huh.
I have hard times kind of based on the warfare, based on what I hear, based on what I see. I'm not a war expert, but what I do hear, the way the war is led, suggests to me personally, the way the war is led today by Russians on Ukrainian soil suggests that it's becoming so political. There is no common sense warfare tactics there anymore. At least twice a week, things are shifting. They're doing some irrational things, irrational наступление, irrational,
Completely
relocation,
agree with
and
you.
and that, which
Absolutely.
which to my mind, again, not a war expert, suggests that these generals are puppets to Kremlin.
Yes, they are, but they're capable of doing rational things while they're protecting themselves. While they're protecting themselves, because on the front they follow the orders mostly, right? And these orders are coming from Kremlin. And again, the world according to Kremlin is a completely different planet that you and I don't know what it is. But all the generals in this system know that the Kremlin will never blame itself. It will always blame them, and it will always make them to pay. And they know that the most important thing for them is to protect themselves, not to win the war, but to protect themselves. And doing that, they can do a lot of very smart thing, very rational thing, and very unexpected and really, really strategic things.
Well, this we shall learn.
Absolutely, I completely agree. There is one very quick thing. It's in addition to what I was talking about, what happened in Ramstein. As of now, I imagine, I think, I don't know, but as of now, the secret services of Russia, the people who are responsible for all these, what happens behind the wars and everything else, they looked at that meeting in Ramstein. They look at that 40 representative of 40 countries. They're looking at the serious of these things, and they understand that the only thing they can do to counter it, aside from the propaganda hogwash about nuclear attacks and everything else, because the world stopped really believing that that is possible, is that digging from all the databases and all that was doing for tens and tens of years, digging compromised information on the foreign leaders, on the Western leaders, on all these guys, the secretaries of defense, the politicians, everybody who's any influence. Now these guys are digging into their sexuality, into their family affairs, into the family affairs and the financial affairs of their children, of their wives, of their organization, anything compromised to make them do something that would counter that enormous move that Ramstein is defined. So I just want trying to alert the Western leaders, the Western politicians, the Western scientists, all the people who one way or another can be influenced in that area, that be careful about your emails. Be careful. I mean, you cannot go in the past and change that, but be prepared. Not only careful, but even more, be prepared to be blackmailed. Be prepared for the things that you don't want to be in public to be presented in front of you in exchange to betraying your country or your people or whatever you do. Do not allow them to catch you unprepared. Think ahead. That will be a huge wave, in my opinion, of this kind of information going to the public sources, and you will be getting these calls from these strange people with an accent not far, much different from mine, actually. And yes, and being prepared is much better. There's a lot of things that you can do. And the people who do the security in this organization should, in my opinion, also be prepared for that and should prepare their people who they protect and recommend them what to do in these situations.
We covered it all.
That's it for today. Thank you so much, Regina.
Thank you, Sasha.
Always a pleasure working with you.